Good afternoon. Welcome to Real Estate Raw. This is Wednesday, and I'm Bill Ham. This is our regular session. Thanks for joining me. Hope everybody had a good holiday last couple of weeks. I was fine. Went over to some friend's house. They cooked. We ate, left. They cleaned. Best kind of holiday for me, right? So hope everybody had good Thanksgiving holidays. Hope everything's going well. Give you a quick recap. The last session we had, we've been off for 2 weeks. So the last session we had was on master lease options. Talked about that about 2 weeks ago. Getting into using master lease options for taking over properties. What is it? It's two different types of contracts: the master lease, the option to purchase. How do we use those collectively to take over deals in a distressed market? So if you want to learn about master lease options, go check out that video. Anyway, tell us who you are, where you're from, say hi in the chat group, introduce yourself. Always like to keep this networking. So appreciate everybody stopping by. Talk about renovating property and when should we use capital? When should we raise capital to do renovations, and when should we maybe use cash flow to do renovations? And let's kind of talk about budgeting both of those. As always, we're going to have Monica Wyndham with us. Monica is property manager extraordinaire. She has her own services and offers her own management consulting services. So if anybody needs management consulting, certainly reach out to Monica. She'll probably be saying hi here in chat room in just a second. Mark, good to see you. All right, so let's get started. So my opinion on when to use capital raise and when to use cash flow for renovations depends, really, is the answer. I would say personally that you are better off typically using cash flow for renovations instead of raising capital if you can help it. I've done a whole lot of both. I've raised a lot of capital, put a lot of money in escrow, gone in and done big renovation projects. When I met Monica, she was managing one of my largest properties, 196 units, and we renovated probably a good 100 out of those 196 units. We wrapped all the buildings in vinyl siding. We did a bunch of that stuff. If you saw my virtual property tour where I was doing it on Street View on Google, that was one of the properties I drove you through. We showed you outside of it. Huge deal. Spent a couple hundred grand renovating that property. And so I've done both. And what I have found, I'll kind of explain the math first and why I kind of take one opinion or the other. If you go out and raise capital, you're going to have the money up front, and that's great, and that makes the investment much safer. So if you're doing a very large deal, you probably want to go out and raise that capital up front. But you're going to give up equity for that, right? And so what I'm thinking in the way it went for me was the deals where I used cash flow instead of equity that I raised, I wound up owning more of the equity in that deal. Right now, the downside was that deal didn't cash flow, right? And so I tell people all the time, cash flow is not everything. It's not all what you think. And that kind of sounds like real estate blasphemy, but I'm telling you, cash flow is fine. Cash flow is good. You got to have cash flow, of course. You got to buy for cash flow. But if you think cash flow, the whole multifamily business is based on cash flow, you're wrong. Anybody that thinks appreciation is a nice to have, let me take a sidebar here. Anybody that thinks appreciation is simply something that's nice to have and they buy for cash flow has never tried to exit a deal that didn't have appreciation. Appreciation equals the exit, right? You don't have an increase in value, you're going to struggle to get out of that deal. So that's why, yeah, you want to buy for cash flow, but you have to have that appreciation, right? So if the property is going to appreciate, then we want the largest cut of that appreciation possible, right? And so you really kind of almost have to look at each deal individually, and you have to look at your own personal situation. I felt that I made more money by owning more equity in a good deal, in a good location, that we followed the market cycle, it went up in value, sold it, and got a good chunk of that. I felt like that money turned out to be more money than the money that I made incrementally through cash flow, right? So if you're asking me which one I would prefer to have as far as making money is concerned, I'm always going to tell you the appreciation, in my opinion, will override the cash flow. Now, that being said, maybe not so in a down market, maybe not so like this afternoon when the interest rates have gone up. We can certainly kind of slice that conversation down a whole lot of different ways. But I say that's what one of the ways you want to kind of look at it. Can you tighten the belt, not live on or not collect a tremendous amount of cash flow from that property? If so, then in your analysis, when you're looking at that deal and you say it has X amount of CapEx needed, start seeing if you can get net positive cash flow to cover those repairs if you're not actually trying to make cash flow on the property. So if that property is producing 6, 7, 8, whatever percent cash on cash, you're now going to reinvest that money back into the repairs, into the CapEx, instead of raising all that extra capital and bringing on all those extra investors. Okay, but you're probably going to have a couple of general partners that also agree with that business model. Okay, so right there, you've got to be pretty careful about who you're raising money from. I mean, that obviously goes without saying, but if your investors are other people like yourself, or they're new to the business and they're trying to really make a lot of cash flow in their limited partner investment and this sort of thing, that may not be the right LP, the right kind of investor for that type of deal. You're looking for someone who believes in the long-term equity and the long-term appreciation of a good, solid value add, right? So that's one thing that I would look at. Now, if you're going out and you're doing some big ticket items, like again, Monica and I did in Warner Robins, first off, the revinyl, reskinning or residing of that entire building, I think it was 74 units that we rewrapped in vinyl siding, was $100,000+. All right, that's not something you would have wanted to try and cash flow to get done. So we got to be realistic. We got to stop and say, hold on, cash flow will renovate a certain amount of real estate. Yes, it's good for unit upgrades. It's good for renovating interior stuff like that. But cash flow is not something that I think is really going to work out when you're talking large ticket exterior stuff. Like, we got to go in and replace all the roofs. Okay, you're not going to pay for that with monthly cash flow. Big plumbing, that's something we got to start really watching out for. Hey, raise your hand if you've had plumbing issues, right? And that's going to be, a lot of business going forward, right? Anybody want a part-time job? Go into the plumbing business. I think that's going to be a booming, or buy plumbing stock. That's my stock tip for the day. Buy plumbing stock. I think that's going to be a big thing going forward. But at any rate, so that's where I would say raise money for the large ticket items and use cash flow for more of the smaller items, and just try not to need as much cash flow from that investment. And long term, you can wind up cashing some larger checks. My partners and I did really well in the property in Warner Robins, where we met and hired Monica for the first time. Went in there, got it at a technically a very low cap rate, then turned it into a very high cap rate, then sold it at a medium cap rate. All right. So the long story there, I went in, found the property. It was at 60% occupancy. Looked around the whole city. The whole city was at like 95% occupancy. So wind up hiring Monica and some management. We come in there, we renovate the property, bring the occupancy up to 95. So the lesson here was cap rate, it's not enough information, right? So when I first looked at that deal, looking at it on actuals, the cap rate was like 2, I don't know, 3, something horrible, right? It was really, really low, and it was an old C property, right? But that was a cap rate based on that asset being at 60% occupancy. I did the math and I looked at it and said, well, what's the cap rate when we're at 95% occupancy? And it was like 12 or 13 or something like that. So we bought it, we renovated it, we brought the occupancy from 60 up to 90, 97. I don't remember, Monica, correct me there. And then recompressed the cap rate back down to a 7 about 18 months later, almost 2 years later, at a sale. So that is how you renovate, and that is how you fix and flip multifamily property. And so that particular deal, we never collected 1 red cent of cash flow. That property was cash flowing about $20,000 a month. That it was 3 properties, so it was a little small portfolio. We were producing about $20,000 net positive cash flow every single month. But I never actually collected 1 penny of cash flow from that property. None of my partners did, because we put it all back into the renovations, therefore limiting the amount of money that we needed to inject into the property to begin with, limiting the raise and limiting the actual humans that were involved in that deal. We kept it down to 4 people, and ultimately it turned out to be a really good deal. So there we go, 98%. Thanks, Monica. So this is just kind of a general concept of when you should be using cash flow, when you should be using capital raise to go in and do renovations. Things that we're not 100% talking about right now. I would be actually careful about doing a lot of renovations right now. We don't want to catch the falling knife. So if you're looking at property that you're considering value add, mid-range C-type property value add, What I would tell you right now, value add, especially in this operational market, is going to be clean, safe, and affordable. You want to go in, you want to take that apartment to a level of clean, safe, affordable, and not beyond and not above, because you don't want to spend the money on that because you're not going to get the rent out of it, right? Rents are going to level off, rents are going to cool off. They are a lot of places. Atlanta right now, we've got definitely some softening in the Atlanta market, a lot of construction. The the new starts are above absorption, so we're actually absorbing not enough apartments right now in Atlanta. So that's going to be some rent decline here going forward. So anyway, just want to keep an eye on that kind of stuff. Renovating, catching the fallen knife, not doing renovations right now. Clean, safe, affordable in the C space. We're not talking granite countertops and stainless steel appliances and things like that. Just make that place nice. Don't overspend. That's the key. Don't try and over raise the rent, don't over underwrite, and don't try and overspend on the unit. Then you'll be fine. Then you'll be able to operate the property, no problem. So when you get into that over speculation, that you want to be a little careful in this market cycle. I'll give you another update, something that is not exactly on subject today, but something I was warned about this morning. Interesting new scam going on in multifamily. It's largely hitting in the A-class apartments. But we all were talking today, and I was talking to a few different realtors. Chad, by the way, Monica was the one who told me. This came out of some conferences, and it seems like there's a new TikTok fad going on. If anybody's heard of this, post in the chat. But there's a new group, there's a new subgroup on TikTok that's apparently teaching people how to really fake documents using AI and some of these other different programs. And so the concept is, hey, if you're going to steal big. They're going in, they're creating all different kind of fake IDs and fake backgrounds, and then going in and renting these nice brand new A-class apartments, and then just absolutely never paying the rent. Never even paying the first dollar in rent, right? Because they were never even remotely qualified to be in the unit, but they were able to use this TikTok thing. So what's going on there, we're thinking is that it's going to eventually start to trickle down lower and lower to the C-class properties. It's not really happening so much in the C's and the B's right now, but seeing it as a big wave in the A's. Apparently, this was the big talk at the conference this last weekend. Everybody was talking about really getting hit. Two big topics for the weekend was turnover, apartment turnover, tenant turnover. If anybody's an operator here, you're probably seeing a little bit of turnover right now. That's the interest rates going up, tenants getting hit in the pocket. Good tenants that are all of a sudden becoming bad tenants, turnover. That and this big conversation about the new fraud. New website, snapt.com, snappt.com, is apparently a new website that you can use to go in and tell if these documents have been altered. So I'll make sure we post that in the chat. But that's the new news off the street is we're seeing turnover in the lower properties. You're seeing some concessions in the higher properties. Screen your tenants. If you're having C-space turnover, Monica and I are very familiar with this. We'll just keep an eye on it. Go in, get those units turned. I know it sucks. That tenant was a good tenant. Go ahead, evict, get them out fast as you can. Get that property back online, clean, safe, affordable. Don't spend too much money. The next tenant you want to screen very carefully. Use this snap, snappt.com. Make sure your management company is aware of that stuff. Make sure you're screening those tenants very carefully for fraud. Right, and if you can get a good tenant in there the second go around, sort of post, adjustment to the rates, then you'll probably have a tenant that will stick. So you're just going to have kind of a bit of a dip for a little while, release up, stabilize. You'll be all right. Q1, Q2, especially come tax season. Tax season is always a great time to be leasing up. So those are tips for operators going forward. Things you're going to have to watch out for over the next, let's say, 6 months or so. But again, today's topic, when should we renovate? When should we use cash flow, use capital raise? Capital raise for the big stuff, cash flow for as much of it as you can. Tighten the belt. Don't over-raise capital and tell people that it's cash flow. That's my sort of general rule of thumb. So if you're over-raising and that property is not going to cash flow for a little while, be honest and tell the LPs that. Do not do some kind of Ponzi deal where you're over-raising and putting it in escrow and then telling them it's cash flow and then just making cash flow until you run out of money. That's not cool. Don't do that. Okay, so thank you, Monica, Snappy T. Yeah, check that out. It's not a site I'm very familiar with. I just heard about it today, so I'm passing that on to you. That is fresh off the street. You only get that here, right? No. Very cool. If anybody has any questions, comments, certainly post them over here. Next week, Monica, we're going to do a market update. So that's what we're going to be doing next week on this channel next week, 2 o'clock Wednesday. Invite your friends, invite anybody to the group. Group's growing nicely. We appreciate everybody's support. So next week, I'm going to give you a full market breakdown. I'll probably go into Zoom, do it out of Zoom so we can share screen, do some stuff like that, show you all the things that I've been seeing going on behind the scenes. Some pretty interesting things, so you want to stay tuned for that. Very cool. Appreciate everybody stopping by. Renovation money versus raising money. Always something you want to keep an eye on. Also, again, like I said, be careful about renovating in this market. I think we want to kind of be a little slow down a little bit of that. We're going into an operator market, right? We were in a speculator market. Now we're going into an operator market. So everybody put your operator hat on and get ready. If you need any help with operations, call Monica, call myself, reach out to us. DM us. We're both experts in the business. Love helping people out. If you've got any management questions, if you're stuck somewhere, your management company's doing something weird to you, reach out to us. We can probably help you out. Appreciate it. And realestateraw.com, always check that out. Got about, we're pushing 100 articles over there on that website in the free resource category. So certainly want to get in there. Thanks everybody stopping by. See you next week.